Then he is sent by Paul after that to the island of Crete. Now, he is on the island when Paul writes this letter to him. Paul stopped off in Crete for a short while, but left Titus there to really do the work in establishing the ministry, getting the church on good, solid footing, you see. And it was not an easy ministry. After that, Paul finally tells Titus that he is to go to the region of Dalmatia. So when you begin to put this guy Titus's traveling log together, you realize he goes down to Jerusalem to deal with the issue of circumcision, which would have a real personal application. Then he goes to Corinth, which was a difficult ministry. If you were with us through the Corinthian studies, you might know the situation that was there. Then he goes to Crete, and he's got problems to deal with in Crete, as we shall see. And then he goes to Bosnia. I mean, it was a pretty arduous program, you see. But Paul had great confidence in him. And Titus, like Timothy, was a man that Paul esteemed highly. He considered him to be his own son in the faith. Crete, where Titus is when this letter comes, an island there in the Mediterranean, about 135 miles in length, 50 miles, 30 miles wide. It was a mountainous island, still is, and it was quite populated, at least according to the demographics of that day. And the people there, as we shall see, were difficult. They were problematic people there on the island of Crete. In fact, for you Old Testament people, it's interesting to note that the Philistines that were always hassling the people of Israel, remember Goliath, the brothers and the giants, the Philistines? The Philistines originally came from Crete. They sailed down from Crete down to Philistia. And they were there, of course, as neighbors of the Israelis and a perpetual problem for them. Large mountain there called Mount Ida. I can remember that because I went to Ida Price Junior High School. And on Mount Ida, they believe that that's where Zeus was born, the Greek mythological god Zeus. So it was an island that was steeped in Greek mythology. Mountainous island, populated island with a difficult group of people that lived thereon, you see. And here is where Titus is commissioned by Paul to engage in ministry. So Paul writes him. Now, at this point, you need to realize that this book, Titus, would chronologically fit in between 1st and 2nd Timothy. When Paul wrote Titus, he had been released from his first imprisonment in Rome. Now, the book of Acts ends with Paul in prison. But it wasn't a dungeon, it was a house arrest. He had his own apartment. He was, yes indeed, under guard's eye 24 hours a day. But people could come and go, and then he was released from that situation. He travels around some more, and at that time probably made his visit to Crete. That's how he knew the area. That's how he got Titus there initially. Then he's re-imprisoned, this time by Caesar Nero. This time he's in a dungeon. I mean, a damp, dark dungeon. And then shortly thereafter, he loses his head. He's beheaded by Caesar Nero. Now, 2 Timothy, as we talked about last week, was the last epistle that Paul wrote. So this book of Titus, chronologically, would be slipped between 1 Timothy and 2 Timothy. If you were putting it chronologically, you would go 1 Timothy, Titus, 2 Timothy, and then Paul moves to heaven, you see. Paul says, a servant of God, verse 1, and an apostle of Jesus Christ, according to the faith of God's elect. Paul declares himself to be a servant of God, an apostle of Jesus, according to the faith. Now, that doesn't really capture the meaning of that phrase. It really would be better to say, for the furtherance of the faith. Not according to the faith, but for the furtherance of the faith. I, Paul would say, am a servant, and I am an apostle for the furtherance of the faith of God's elect. That is, that God's people will go further and do better. That's Paul's desire. I just want